the election.
Absolutely.
So I don't.
This is one of the areas where when we get into this, I don't understand if there's like brain breaking happening or what's going on. I don't know what world we can ever live in where we say that Trump is less divisive for the country than Biden.
Joe Biden literally used the Occupational Safety and Hazard Administration to try to cram down vax mandates on 80 million Americans. That's insane.
What about supercalifragilistic? And then you're
what about pneumo ultramicroscopic?
or the science terms.
Yeah, exactly.
Or what about the 7,000 letter thing that's from part of biochemistry?
I got my education in the Soviet Union, so we just did math.
That's why you're a useful person.
Does body count matter? Following is a debate between Ben Shapiro and Destiny, each arguably representing the right and the left of American politics. They are two of the most influential and skilled political debaters in the world. This debate has been a long time coming, for many years. It's about 2.5 hours, and we could have easily gone for many more. And I'm sure we will. It is only round one. This is the Lex Friedman Podcast. To support it, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, dear friends, here's Ben Shapiro and Destiny. Ben, you're conservative. Destiny, you're a liberal. Can you each describe what key values underpin your philosophy on politics and maybe life in the context of this left-right political spectrum? Want to go first?
Yeah. So I think that we have a huge country.
The right
full
heroes
of
could
a lot
make
of people,
all the
a lot of
difference.
individual talents, capabilities. And I think that the goal of government, broadly speaking, should be to try to ensure that everybody's able to achieve as much as possible. So on a liberal level,
I will bring
usually means
peace to
some
this
people might
universe,
need a little
no
bit of a
matter the
boost when it comes to
cost.
things like education. They might need a little bit of a boost when it comes to providing certain necessities like housing or food or clothing. Broadly speaking, I mean, I'm still a liberal, non-communist or socialist. I don't believe in the, total command economy, total communist takeover of all of the, economy. But I think that broadly speaking,
And that government can and should be big.
I will leave
Not
this
necessarily.
universe a better place
I
than
noticed
it
that when
was
liberals talk
before
about government,
I was
especially
created.
Coming in 30
taxes, it seems like they
seconds.
talk about it
Stay
for
strong.
taxes' sake or bigness sake. So people talk about taxes sometimes as like a punishment. Tax the rich.
I
I
never
think
called
taxing the
myself
rich is
that.
fine insofar as it funds the programs that we want to fund. But Democrats have a really big problem demonizing success or wealth, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing to be wealthy, to be a billionaire, or whatever, as long as we're funding what we need to fund.
The battle starts in 5.
Ben, what do you think it means to be a
4,
conservative?
3,
What's the philosophy
2,
that underlies your
1.
views?
First of all, I'm glad that Destiny, you're already coming on as Republican since we hold a lot in common in terms of the basic idea that people
We
want
need to
to
stop that
have
vehicle
as
in
possible,
its tracks.
and also insofar
Sheer. How
as
nice.
the government
Some assistance,
the
please.
minimum amount necessary to interfere in people's lives in order to pursue certain functions, particularly at the local level. So a lot of the government discussions on pragmatic end up being discussions about where government ought to be involved, but also at what level government ought to be involved. And I'm incredibly very used for that. I think that local governments, because of higher level
Better stop that
humanity
vehicle.
and consent, are capable of doing more things. And as you have practical change, it becomes more and more impractical and more and more divisive. In my view, government is basically there to preserve certain liberties. Those good liberties create the government. I feel better so far. They are more important than what the government does. The job of government is to maintain, for example, defense, property rights, freedom. These are the key focus of government as generally expressed in the Constitution. And I agree with the general philosophy. Now, it doesn't mean that get closer to the ground. By the way, it's also originally but if we're going to define conservatism, we would actually be able to learn
They
that
hit a
and
checkpoint.
understand how
Now might be a good time to stop them.
core values. And so for me, there's one, communicates nature.
There's
That
still
nature
so
is
much to
neither
do.
good nor bad. We have aspects of goodness and we have aspects of badness. Human beings are sinful. We have temptations. And what that means is that we have to be careful not to incentivize the bad.
This
and that we
nexus
should
point could be the
incentivize
key
the
to
good.
solving
Human
our
beings do have agency
crisis.
and are capable of making decisions
Better
in
stop that
the vast
vehicle.
majority of circumstances. And it is better for society if we act as though they do. Second, the basic idea of
Cosmos
that all
heals you.
human beings have equal value before the law. Versus I think equal value
feel
before
better
God. I think
already.
it's also the tenet of civilization being non-pluralist is that every individual has
Cosmos
equivalent
heals,
value in cosmic terms. But that's not the same reason every person
I am at your service.
to rectify
We are undefeatable!
cosmic justice.
Quantum magic. Never miss.
More often than not,
Maximum pulse!
materialize in a variety of ways. Each set up the traditional would be so for you and your family is the chief institution of society, the little platoons of society, as Burke suggested, in which free market and property rights are extraordinarily valuable and necessary because every individual has the ability to be creative with their property and to
He stopped him in his tracks!
alienate that property.
Balance is restored.
Finally, I think there's a policy that suggests that the world is not filled with wonderful people who all agree with us on things like that. And those people
I am at your
will pursue
service.
adversarial interests if we do not protect our own interests.
Can I ask you a question? Yeah, sure. I'm excited for this conversation, but I consider you to
Cosmos
be
heals.
but I feel like sometimes there are ways to
Some
sort of talk
assistance,
about
please.
certain issues that seem to drive logic and so I'm not sure you feel but even so,
Already.
before I ask this question in relation to education, we can agree broadly speaking that statistics are real and that not everybody could do everything.
Cosmos
So for a
heals
grounded
you.
example, my life was pretty bad. I got into streaming and I turned my life around. And I'm pretty cool, but I can't expect
I
everybody
have
to
found
do
more
what I
lost
did,
souls.
right? Like everybody being able to join the NBA, to be able to
Cosmos heals you.
Okay. So, I used to be a lot more independent. I was 21. And one of the things that dramatically changed kind of my view on government manipulation,
Healing
I think,
power.
I guess in society, came when it came time to
Stronger together.
one of the things that I noticed was when it came to
Born again! Maximum pulse!
however, the public schools
Never miss.
district, house there, I moved
Destiny
there, and my son
awaits.
was able to go to those schools. And he's been going through those schools. And the difference of availability of like technology, like these kids are taking home iPads in like first grade. They've got like huge computer labs and everything. Do you think that there's some type of, I don't want to say injustice or unfairness, because I'm not even looking at it pragmatically. Because there might be children that are in schools that if they just have better platforms or access to technology or development, they could become more productive. Like political help, that they could actually achieve more and do better for them.
So I think that on the list of priorities when it comes to education, the availability of technology is
I am
actually fairly
born
low
anew.
on the list of priorities.
Sure,
Meaning
the two
that
things
the-
I've heard are food availability and I think air conditioning.
I must reserve my power for now.
Sure.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing in terms of education itself, not
Quantum
specific facilities
magic.
that we're talking about, would actually be two-parent family households, communities that have fathers in them. It's actually the number one decisive
Healing power.
topic. And the idea that money
Extermination!
Disappear!
talking about tens of thousands of dollars and doesn't result so when you say if we could give every kid an iPad, would you give every kid an iPad? The question is not if I had
I have risen.
what are the outcomes that you seek in terms of the means with which you are seeking them. And so, again, I think that the question is I quibble with the premise of the question, which is that, again, the chief injustice in
Cosmos
education on the
heals
list
you.
of injustices is lack of availability to technology or that it's a funding problem.
Cosmic
And
light.
I half agree with you there, but I don't think any amount of changes in your school will create.
Only 60 seconds left!
Right, we can't bring it.
I totally agree with you. So I think it's a fundamental educational problem, not in fact a schooling problem. I think that it pre-exists that.
Sure, but then I feel now I feel like this is kind of the circle merry-go-round usually brought up in research is one is air
Some
conditioning,
assistance,
that
please.
children in hotter environments just don't bonus. And then the second one is access to food.
Battlefield
So, like, kids that are
ready
given
again.
like breakfast or lunch that's provided at school. Now I
30
agree that
seconds.
neither of these things might be determinative. If 20% of kids were graduating, 80% of kids were graduating, or these kids are all going, you know, from their GED to the workforce.
This is real
Where
firepower!
do you think there should be like some minimum threshold or minimum basis of like, at the very least, every school should have a doctor, or every school should have
Maximum pulse!
every school should have
Don't mess with the amazing Spider-Man! Armed and dangerous again!
I mean, there's no doubt that more money anyone will create pretty large wins. How large is the market and how big
Bring on the
delta is. And so,
I have risen.
what if we ignore what I would think are the big primary questions of education, namely family structure, value of education at home, how much you have parents who are capable or willing to help with homework, what are the incentive structures we can set up for a society that actually facilitate that, how local communities take ownership of their schools, right? All of these issues.
Born again!
Us against the world! Sounds great. In terms of prioritization, value, cost, the things that actually move the needle, pave the way in terms of public policy, I have not. And in fact, I think that many of them end up being disproportionate waste of money. You know, I've talked before, pretty controversially, about the fact that in enormous
There's still a chance to stop them.
enormous of that food in garbage. Is there a better way to get it? But it seems to me that one of the big stories of the left approach government is what if we hit every now and again? And my question is, what if the net is a problem? What if there's a much bigger substantive problem that needs to be solved in order to, if you're shifting back to the Titanic, sure, you can
They
make
hit
the Titanic
checkpoint.
slightly more
Now
balanced.
might be a
That
good
should
time to
slightly
stop
better
them.
oriented. But the real question is the water that's gaping into the Titanic, right?
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. But again, I feel like we're on the conservative merry-go-round that have never wanted to address
That's not
any
conservative. I can give you 10 ways.
Well, sure, but so like here would be the merry-go-round. I would say that like there's a minimum funding for schools that I
Better
think
stop that vehicle.
well, they can help us most. Two-parent households actually aren't the problem. But the issue isn't actually birth control. The issue is actually you need a certain amount of money to get out of the marriage.
This is real firepower!
Well, just clear. Yeah, but like, what are the
Don't
precursors?
Now or
people
never.
before you're married.
Stop
Sure,
them.
Done.
That's great. We can say that.
Maximum pulse!
1,000 years ago.
And then they, you know, the vast majority of people in this country with kids,
Amazing
the
Spider-Man!
vast majority of people with kids in this country now are not married.
Only 60 seconds
But a lot
left.
of it is societal change. Something
Yeah, true.
changed. There wasn't giving up on choice.
But a lot of those things, in terms of resting on whether or not people get married,
Don't give them another inch. Or
People are worse off now than they were 50, 60 years ago when the marriage rate
Bring
was
on the chaos! I'm doing this my way!
So, in other words, people are richer now than occasionally and yet they're having more babies out of wedlock.
one of the biggest indicators of whether or not people get married is how much money
They shall not escape our wrath now.
people don't have.
down to 30
Do
seconds.
when they just finish college, when they don't have enough down.
Some assistance,
We have
please.
changed meaning that everyone is rich. That is, by the way, a huge percentage of Americans in the United States because of profit.
Armed and dangerous! Again! Us against the world!
Serve your mother and father. Sure, that is all of it.
You'll have to keep
Do you
fighting
think
until
that
we have a
chocolate
winner.
marriages are, well, let's say this.
Or is this like sort of the reasonable direction for all of modern
It was, but history moves in one direction.
Born again!
you know, people don't.
Another
In
epic
what
victory.
way?
Okay, then I don't think we've, I mean, like, we're getting high social standards back to, like, oh, well, let's go 100 years back and do things that, you know, quite a
There's the
like,
entire left right now is arguing we regress social standards by rejecting Roe versus Wade. So that's obviously not.
the Roe versus Wade, another social standard.
Yeah.
Number two, what if you read the actual majority of opinion on Roe v. Wade, we can see that socially we actually never made huge progress on how society viewed abortion. This has always been an incredibly divisive thing. right? Even that was, I think, part of Alito's writing on it was that things like gay marriage, for instance, we've kind of moved past, and it's not really as debated anymore. But abortion was never a settled topic.
The notion that the arc of history constantly moves in one direction is belied by nearly all of the 20th century.
What do we mean by that?
I mean,
women's rights, civil rights,
barbarism, communism, Nazism, all of that was a regression from what was happening at, for example, the beginning of the 19th century and the 20th century.
In what way?
Nazism and communism weren't a regression from what was going on in
You'll
1905.
need a
in
top-notch
terms of
team
like
to win this
communism
one.
being a regression, for instance, I'm not a communist, but like the industrialization of the Soviet Union happened under a communist society.
I will bring
Industrialization-
peace to this universe,
It did.
no matter
Yes,
the
there's-
I
cost.
consider that a regression. A
Sure.
moral regression, which is what we are talking about now. Moral regression. And you're
You're-
suggesting that moral regression, I wouldn't term a return to traditional values a moral regression, you would. But your suggestion is that history only moves in one direction, and I'm suggesting that history does not only move in one direction, it tends to move actually back and forth.
Sure. I don't think that all of history moves in one direction. There are going to be wars, there are going to be peace. I think in general we're more peaceful now.
I will bring
But I think
peace
when
to
we look
this
at the way
universe,
that people
no
live
matter
their
the
lives,
cost.
I think that we tend to move in a certain
The
direction
White
socially.
Queen
So when it comes to
always
things
gets
like
what she
racism,
wants.
Thank you. 30
slavery,
seconds
or
before you
women's
attack.
rights, I think
Get
that there
ready.
are two huge things that probably aren't changing in the U.S., and one is access to contraception, and one is
One of
women
these
working
days,
jobs.
we're going
I think
to
that these
have
two
to
things are
talk
probably
about
huge things that are moving us off of shotgun marriages or
No.
getting married very early on. And I don't see
Today,
those.
we're on
Do you
the
think
same
that those
side.
two things are going to change fundamentally?
First of all, what the data tend to show is that actually more highly educated people, as you were saying, tend to get married more. Because the idea is that women getting an
battle
education
starts
can
in
help those
5,
off marriage. It's the
4,
opposite.
3,
Usually
But those women aren't
not
getting.
educated.
But those women aren't getting shotgun. Those women aren't having.
I how to get more married. And when you suggest that higher levels of education are going marriage and making problem, I'm concerned with the data suggests that actually as you raise up the educational ladder, people tend to marry more than they are lower down in education. If you're a high school graduate, you're less likely to marry than if you're a postgrad.
I agree with you, but that's because one of the biggest precursors to getting married is having like a
I
level of
will
education.
take my
So if people
revenge
get
for
more
that.
educated, they obtain the economic ability, and then they're able to come to a position to get more education.
There's another confound there. There's a confound there that people who get married tend to be people who stay married. It's one way to break the cycle. You get married, and that's something that everyone can. And it's no such thing as some unbreakable, unshatterable barrier to get married and have kids. I don't understand where this is coming from. Why is that such a challenge?
I don't think it's unbreakable or unshatterable. The initial point was for school, if we could provide a minimum level of educational stuff for children, that's probably good. But when we retreat back to, well, it has to be the families that are fixed
You're
first,
halfway there.
fixing
Keep
families is a
going.
multivariate problem that has
Listen,
so many.
I am fine within my local community. We all vote. Again, I suggest the local community vote. I'm not local community voting for lunches, or air conditioning, or whatever it is. We all vote. The more local you get, the more aid you get. We have your name. All the funds are a very, very solid community. Community that gives you something. Helping one another. All the funds. When it comes to the actual problem, in the political sphere, and this happens all the time, is arguing on top of the iceberg about how we can move the needle 0.5 percentage point, as opposed to the entire iceberg melting beneath the oil price, and that's just so much married again. Well, I mean, from the
Vehicle reached the checkpoint. Keep up the
people who are
momentum.
not getting married are not going to be having kids. What else suggests people who are married are going to be having kids. So the demographic profile, actually, over time, is rather going to shift. towards the Everyone in my community is married. I think minimum. And so what's happening actually, demographically,
I am ready to put on a show.
is very hard. So if you're talking about the argument we should have for marriage, I would say that demographically overcome long periods of everyone generating. Over long periods of time, the only people who are voting income to get married.
Yeah, I don't know. But I'm just saying that, again, on the merry-go-round, I think that there
Now
are good
it's
conversations to be
showtime.
had about people getting married because stable families produce better children that are less likely to crime, that are more likely to go to school.
I was fine.
Not each other. I do not really disagree with any of all of that is true. It's just frustrating that sometimes when you bring up any problem, all of it will circle back to other things that make it like we can't make any progress in any area that like fixing the way. I literally school funding. So what do you do when
I mean, the tends to happen in terms of government is people love arguing about the problems that can be solved by opening a wallet, and nobody likes to solve a problem
ready to
by,
help.
you know, closing
Magneto rays need to never
stop.
stop.
Having kids participate the things that actually build society. I'm fine with arguing about each of these policies, and whether we apply them or not is a matter generally of practice, not morality. It's a matter of consensus. It's not say morality.
You're not going anywhere.
If such a thing is, for example, if we use a welfare program, you have to decide how effective it is, to what crowd it applies, where the cutoffs are, because it's disincentivized work, it's not. All of these are pragmatic concerns. But on a moral level, the generalized objection that I have to people on the left side of the aisle is that they like to focus in these conversations very often
Feeling
as
fantastic.
though it's a conversation with people who are drunk searching
My work
under
here is not
the
done.
lamp for their keys. The problems they want to look at are the problems that are solved by the government.
Tremble before fire!
Are the actual science working in
You're not
government
going
and not
anywhere.
particularly solved by government. But the ones they want to ignore and pursue in the actual state.
And I 1,000,000,000% agree. And then obviously my criticism of the conservative side
Another
is the
fearsome
opposite,
blow.
where there are parts where government is remedy some issues. For instance, children having sex with each other, producing other children out of wedlock, like sometimes having a program to prevent that. But I didn't have time for these. When I was in football practice, I was doing cross-country practice. I went and worked for a bear. I agree with you.
The moon haunts you!
I hate to be that guy, but it's somebody that works for a while. Sure, I'm going to check the virus.
Against the world!
There's only so much you can do in school when there's so much I agree. Government is not like the solution to programs.
And it's actually not the solution to education depending on
Needed that boost.
some solutions,
I
yeah.
won't
some
make the
solutions,
same
no.
mistakes
The
again.
only thing I'm looking at is, as I said earlier, just like these minimum threshold things where it's like, where can government make, because you mentioned marginal, which I think is a really good way to look at things. There's marginal cost. and
I
marginal
am
gain,
ready to put on a
where
show.
the first $1,000 per student you spend might give you a these are all pragmatic steps. And actually, this is what we need to add by the
Get that baby moving
Okay, yeah.
again.
As we descend from the discussion of conservatism and liberalism, let's go to the pragmatic muck.
Born from the chaos.
Trump versus Biden. Between the two of them,
Clearly you need
who was in their first term the better president, and thus who should win if the two of them are in
feeling stronger
the
already.
second term.
Chaos control. An enchanted object. Interesting. Will not be erased again. Moonlight hour has been read. Goodbye.
In terms of
Time for my best
actual
hit.
policy, I think being on fire right now is being fairly good example. The aspect of coal being on fire and where the incentive structure came from and how all of that. And when it comes to the economy, I think that Trump's been on the record with better than he didn't overfilm. He did. But he also had a huge percentage of gains in the economy when people on the lower end
Only 60 seconds
spectrum.
left. My work
Actually,
here is not done.
the gross income to the average American rose about $6,000 during his term. The unemployment rates were very, very low before COVID. Yeah, I think the U.S. have to separate the Trump administration into
Us against the world!
COVID obviously is sort of a black swan event, the most signal change in politics.
Don't mess with the amazing spider!
Governance during COVID is almost its own category, which we discussed. But in terms of foreign policy, in terms of domestic policy, I think that Trump is significantly better than Biden.
Down to 30 seconds. Inflation. We're out of time.
Saving things in wage, everything from 20 to 30% more expensive. We're talking about massive increases in debt that he didn't raise
Thanks so much.
under Trump, raised by about a little under $1 trillion.
I don't have to be center stage. Born vehicle reached the checkpoint. Keep up the momentum.
But then Joe Biden continued to fire more money.
Goodbye.
That obviously, in my opinion, bad. Then you get to the rhetoric, and you get to the stuff that Donald Trump said. And I said before,
Under my spell.
my view is that Donald Trump has
The real
a lot of shit. I think that Donald Trump does say a lot of things. I think that that is basically
once,
baked
I'm
into the cake,
vulnerable.
which is why everyone who's bewildered by the polls is ignoring human nature, which is, at the beginning, when you see something very shocking. It's very shocking. And then if you see it over and over and over and over for years on end, it is no longer shocking. It is just part of the background noise like tinnitus.
Don't let anything
It becomes
stand in your way.
something that your brain adjusts for. And so why we like a lot of nonsense
No
rhetoric.
match for me.
Performing economically, really problem.
I am ready to put on a show.
And it comes to his own rhetoric. You can argue that it's great because Trump was coming in with such wild rhetoric that just a maintenance of that wild rhetoric doesn't really change, again, the baseline. For Biden, he came in the same way that Obama did, sort of soaring rhetoric of American unity. Like Trump came in, he's like, I'm the president, this is what I am, and I'm going to say the things I want to say. I'm going to throw it. They're like, okay. With Biden, he came in at a time of all Americans, unify everybody. And that quality committee broke down a lot of oppositional language about his political opponents in particular, to lump in, for example, huge swaths of the movement with the people who participated fans generally. He sort of lumping in everybody who has Republicans wasn't personally signed on to it. That sort of stuff has been terrible. And again, I think he is no longer capable of...
Us against the world!
You'll have to keep fighting until you have a winner.
I am born anew.
It really is like you're just sort of waiting for him to fall. I mean, it's sad to say. I mean, the other day, he was speaking for what was, in effect, his campaign kickoff. And this is in Valley Forge. Jill rushed up there, like, as soon as he was done, Jill rushed up there.
Can't expect to win them all.
Shot up the hand, right, guide him away so he can Shane Bill's Roomba. And, that's not real, let's put it this way, it does not apply at this point. Joe Biden rhetorically. Again, that's a different problem than Trump's problem, but that's my analysis.
This is one of the areas where when we get into this, I don't understand if there's like brain breaking happening or what's going on. I don't know what world we can ever live in where we say that Trump is less divisive for the country than Biden. I think it is so patently obvious. Trump is so divisive. Like, not only does Trump make an enemy out of every person in the opposition party, he makes an enemy out of his own party and every single person around him. Like, we all watched him bully, Jeff Sessions. We all watched him bully his own party on Twitter. We all watched, like, all of these people walk away from him.
The right heroes
even
can
recently,
make all
I think,
the difference.
The Secretary of Defense Esper and John Kelly, the Chief of Staff, were saying, I think Trump is a threat to democracy. You've got all of his prior people who are around him, some of his
to find the
allies. You've got
magic
Bill
in this
Barr
world.
that won't co-sign
But it
a
does
single
help.
thing that he says. You've got all these people that he used to work with that all say Trump is a horrible, evil person. He is ineffective as a leader. He doesn't accomplish anything, and he didn't. To say that Biden has failed at bipartisanship when, we've got the CHIPS Act, we've got the IRA, we've got the ARP, we've got the bipartisan infrastructure bill, when we've got like all this major legislation that is working in this historically divided Congress, as opposed to Trump that
I have made my share of mistakes.
I don't
But I
understand
am
where we ever
fighting
are in
every
this
day.
world where
We'll be coming
Biden
in
is
30
somehow
seconds. Stay
more
strong.
divisive than Trump. Even the speeches that are bringing up, they always bring up. I remember that one. I think we might have even done it on our episode. The one speech that Biden gave, where at one point the background is red, and
That Philly speech I referenced.
yeah, they're like, oh my God, it's over, this is the end. And then meanwhile, you got Donald Trump, coming into office saying things like, if you burn the flag, you should have your citizenship revoked. Or talking about
battle starts in 5,
DSC, that I'm going to
4,
investigate
3,
every single one
2,
of these
1.
media organizations for corruption.
You have to stop them from securing the mission area.
Court.
Before reality unravels.
Talking about
Being stronger on
we're
the
going to investigate all these people that are trying to try.
What a pair.
Trump is like the most divisive president I think we've ever had, at least in my lifetime, being an American citizen. And the rhetoric from him is just I mean, this is a guy that's known for political opponents.
Just what I need.
Right, like that's what Trump does. It's funny, but even as a resident of Florida, if Florida had another manager, Trump would vote. Because you had, I think that was one of the things I heard about Biden. Building glass.
That's
Yeah, that hurricane stuff that Biden did there. You guys have aid, $1 billion, you can have it. Meanwhile, Trump, I think, is building the federal funding from blue states that wouldn't stuff to the point where the National Guard, but they don't like doing enough about rioting. Yeah, Trump is literally the biggest divisive person in the world. I don't see how on any metric he is ever succeeding in divisive. In terms of the economy, I think it's funny that Republicans are keen to say that, well, we can't really grade Trump, post-COVID, because obviously COVID has something left, which is fair. Pre-COVID,
Double KO. Well, who's next?
he did deficit spending, that's provided a historical and an economy that was already like blazing past the final years of Obama. We were supposed to open up
You're not going anywhere.
Unemployment rate is falling. Now under Biden, unemployment rate is falling. It's such that Trump, we can say,
Us against the world.
You're great to see.
Right after the housing
Don't mess with the amazing Spider-Man.
walk out of office, having burned entire American society to the ground economically. Now we've got to cut highways.
Born again.
Obama did during his first years just cut from where Trump elected. And we look at Biden now, who's trying to recover from COVID, and now we're grading him on. Yeah, that's something. We can go into foreign policy. On foreign policy, I'm gonna be honest. I am I'll probably come off as more because I'm not a big fan of this. And agrees, like I think people like Trump are going to be the most devilish isolationist people ever. They don't want to do anything international. They just want to protect America, be at home, protect our economy, don't do anything internationally. That's why he's constantly undermining NATO and constantly attacking all the European Union, cheering on Brexiting away from the EU. I think that being said, I think that Biden's done a phenomenal job when it comes to Trump. I think that the coalition building is so important to Ukraine, Russia. So we decided to go to our European allies and our NATO allies and build a coalition in Ukraine so that wasn't only the United States. Personally, especially after doing a whole bunch of research, I do tend to side with Israel for Palestine and a lot of Israeli-Palestinian conflicts. I'm glad that Biden, rather than managing the conflict with Israel, is trying to rein in some of the more I'm proud that Biden said, hey, listen, we're going to delay some of these attacks. Hey, listen, we are going to allow humanitarian aid to there. Hey, listen, we are going to try to not kill as many Palestinians while still saying that he would be a supporter of Israel in the conflict, assuming the civilian casualties don't go too high. For foreign policy, I mean, the biggest one to Biden is Afghanistan. And you're going to talk about, Inspector General
Us against the world. Born again.
Disappear!
When Biden took office, we had 25 left in Afghanistan.
Disappear!
Don't mess with the amazing Spider-Man.
I want to ask a few questions on each one of these.
Yeah, sure.
So let's talk about divisiveness for a second. So there's no one who can make the case that Donald Trump is not divisive. Yeah, of course, he's incredibly divisive. It's a given. Do you treat Biden's rhetoric with the same level of seriousness that you treat Trump's rhetoric? Or should I try exactly the other way around? Should we treat Trump's rhetoric with the same level of seriousness as Joe Biden?
We got company.
Broadly speaking, especially in I try not to take politics and that, but broadly speaking, I'm going to look at the rhetoric and the action, and I am going to grade that. So yes, I would hold Biden and Trump to
My feeling is in one area, for clarification of this individual, is that I of course don't treat Trump's rhetoric in the same way that I treat Biden or Obama. He's utterly uncalibrated. He says whatever he wants to at any given time, and it doesn't even match with his policy very well.
Can I ask you, for our head of state, our chief executive, would rhetoric be arguably one of
The answer is yes. And now if you're given the choice between a person who thinks things are divisive and a person who an uncalibrated rhetoric says things that are divisive. And so the evidence that Joe Biden is divisive is every poll taken since essentially August. He is by all big amounts incredibly close. A huge percentage of Americans are deeply unhappy, not only with his performance, but don't believe he's a uniter. That's just the reality. And that needs to be a reflection. I mean, honestly, maybe put as much on Trump as Biden personally. Maybe the American people are historically divided because of social media and social media is cesspool. And all
One
that.
thing that I would ask you about that, though, is I agree, especially when you look at favorability, but sometimes when I look at these polls and start to disaggregate them by party, I wonder if it's actually So, is it really that Biden is completely divisive, or is it
Don't mess with the amazing Spider-Man!
Barack Obama
I agree.
than Joe Biden, actually.
But they didn't feel as strongly about Trump as they did about, like, Romney Warren.
In what way? I mean,
And
like,
the allegiance to Trump.
oh no, there's certainly more allegiance to Trump than there is to Romney or McCain, largely because Trump won in 2016. But beyond that, the point that I'm making is that if you're looking at the stats in terms of divisiveness, Republicans always find the Democratic Party divisive. The question is, and right now, there are a lot of it. So when you're divisive affects what they say. Right, and I'm separating that off from like
Second chances over. Hunkering down.
otherwise it's just on like the fourth level. If he's insulting people as opposed to Joe Biden doing MAGA Republican. Like if I were to just for an alien come down from space and look at these two statements, I'd say this one's more divisive than this one. But then there's the reality of being a human being in the world, and that is everyone can take that. And Joe Biden again started off with the patina of being non-divisive, and now has emerged as divisive. If you don't mind, I can only get to the foreign policy questions because it's slightly less interesting.
Sure.
Yeah,
Well, can
you're
I,
free to
yeah,
answer,
just,
trigger for it.
just one quick thing, I guess, like, because we could say the reality of it, and we can look at opinion polls. What if we look at, like, legislative accomplishments? Like, Biden is working on a 50-50 divided Senate. Donald Trump had both House of Congress and the Supreme Court and got, like, no major legislation passed.
Well, I mean, he did lose Congress in 2018.
Pick your hero.
But prior to
Or
that,
villain.
because
I'm
we
not
got
judging.
we got the infrastructure bill, I think, in 1 year, which Trump promised for his entire presidency, didn't get anywhere
Well,
on it.
I mean, yes, his Republican base was not in favor of mass spending on infrastructure, and neither am I. So there's that. I think that's
Sure.
mostly a state and local
But they
issue.
were in favor of mass spending for tax cuts?
That's not a spending. I mean,
Effectively it is, right? Like,
effectively, it's not.
well, if you're cutting tax receipts,
Who are
you're
you
not
calling a
changing the level of
raccoon,
spending,
huh?
like Biden did with the IRA.
I mean, again, we have a fundamental philosophical difference here. I think that when the government takes my money, that is not the government somehow being more fiscally responsible. And when the government
I'm
allows
a
me
good
to take
guy
money, I don't
who
see that as government
occasionally
spending. I
takes
see that
stuff
as
that
my
doesn't
money,
belong
and
to
the government is taking less of it.
That's great, but at the end of the day, the government's still going to be in a deficit spending, and they're going to have to borrow money from the treasury.
Right, we have a
30
spending
seconds
problem.
before you
Yeah, there's
attack.
not a receipts
Get
problem. That's the
ready.
case that I'm making. The problem with Donald Trump is not that he lowered taxes. The United States is one of the most progressive tax systems on the
Holy
planet.
cow.
In fact, if you
Who
wish
are
to
you
have a
calling a
European-style social
raccoon,
welfare
huh?
state, what you actually need is to tax the middle class.
Come on, you're just
And the
kidding
reality
me.
is that the top
Word
20%
war.
of the American population pays literally all net taxes in the United States after state benefits and all of this. So if you actually wanted to have the kind of social welfare state that
battle
many
starts in
liberals seem to want to have, like Northern Europe, for example,
3,
you'd actually have to tax people who make $40,000, $50,000, $60,000.
And I don't want that. I
All
agree
you
with
need to
that.
do is capture the mission area. Got it?
I mean,
If he's like such a uniter.
because I think the Republican Party itself is quite divided. And I think that Trump,
But isn't that his
Can-
job? He's the head of the Republican Party. He's the Republican president of the United States.
I mean, again, I don't think that Joe Biden passed wildly historic legislation. Other than
Sure, but was he
the only bill you can get consensus on tends to be bills that are tax cuts because, as
Looks like the mission area
I
is
think
yours to
agree with
capture
me.
now.
When it comes to polling data, Americans constantly say they're for the government, and then many who ask them
Mission
for
area!
have no idea what they're right, exactly. And so trying to it's much harder to
Power.
think. I mean, you're in this
Together.
coming up, which is why spending was out of control under Trump as well. But there are some Republicans who still
That's
don't want to
what
spend
happens
on
when you
this.
threaten
So
control.
inherently, the tacit, this goes back to the first question, the fact that Republicans think government is there to do what is different than the Democrats. things that are there to do. So the way that the very metric of success for a Democratic president versus a Republican president, namely, for example, the legislation passed. As a Republican, one of my goals is to pass nearly no legislation because I don't actually want the government to go I want to ask a question.
Okay, wait, real quick. So for instance, like Donald Trump wanted to punish China,
must protect
and he
this
wanted to
place.
bring micropresidents back to the United States. You talk about like spending being out of control, and
This time I
not a
need
feeling it looks that I'm not doing that. So why not? Which is right? Like why are they not supposed to Donald Trump?
First of all, I think that whenever the government says something,
That's the boost I need.
that is not going to be
Sure, but there's a difference between like the things they say and spending
You are safe now.
Look, again, I don't see a tax law.
Captured more than half of the mission area. Keep going.
Okay, so then just to understand, so if somebody just did massive
I have risen.
like, reductions in tax receipts, so tax cut after tax cut
let
after
me
tax
heal
cut,
you.
but they didn't change spending at all, you wouldn't consider that like increasing deficit spending or out of control spending. You would just say they're just tax cuts.
No, the opposite. I would consider it a wild. I would consider it a wild overspending.
Spider-Man.
Okay.
Meaning,
Was it under Trump then when he did it?
I mean, the debt ceiling, by the way, under Biden.
We are undefeatable!
Might return.
COVID ended.
That's the boost. Together.
COVID effectively ended in the
victory.
state of Florida by the middle of
The area is almost
Yeah, I mean, even if you're a vaccine fan by like April, May, why fail?
I am Venus! Disappear!
You are safe
Behold!
now.
I mean, like we're
Child!
dollars in the government worldwide, and like there's like a worldwide issue right now because the economy shut down for a year or two. It's not like those right? COVID might be after
You'll
effect.
have to be fighting as a winner!
The definition of inflation is too much money chasing pouring more money on top of that.
Quantum match. Born again.
Use deficit spending. Whereas Biden can at least make the argument that I ought to be deficit spending because the economy is headed for potential recession. Right?
So here's the thing. I don't think that the economy was actually headed for recession. In fact, if you look at the economic statistics, no,
They're still saying that there's like a recession coming, right?
right, but that was
I am
largely
no
because of
golden
the after effects of
god.
inflation, meaning
I am
if you
simply
inflate the
a man
economy,
who wishes
what
to
you're going
use
to end
his
up doing is
power
bursting a
for
bubble,
good.
and then when that bubble bursts, you'll get a recession. I mean, that was the basic idea, right? The question was whether you're going to get a soft landing. But
I will
if you
bring
actually look
peace
at,
to
for
this
example,
universe.
the employment statistics or the
30
economic
seconds
statistics
before
in
you
the United States,
attack.
what they look
Get
like
ready.
under the last year's Obama and then Trump. I mean, this is what the chart looks like. So it looks like this, and then
Anyone
it
want a
hits March
selfie with
of
me?
2020. It goes like that.
What's a selfie?
And then by like September, it
taking
bounces
a
back up
pic
right
of
to V-shaped
yourself with
recovery,
your phone.
and then it starts.
What's
to
a
peter out.
phone?
And
A
then
lot
by-
because of the American
Travel
recovery
tip
plan, right? That
with the
Biden-
right credit card.
Who are you calling a
I mean,
wreck?
4 million
Extra
jobs.
miles.
No, I'm not going to attribute it to that because the rates of growth in job growth from
The
September,
battle
October,
starts in
November were
5,
actually very similar to the rates of job growth
3,
after Joe
2,
Biden took office.
1.
What you see is actually kind of a straight
All
line.
you need to do
The
is
chart
capture
looks
the
like
mission
this.
area.
In any
Got
case,
it?
okay, so
Yeah,
on the
who
foreign
wishes to
policy stuff,
use
we're
his
getting
power
abstruse, but
for
on
good.
the foreign policy stuff, so the questions that I have with regard to Biden on foreign policy, very, very simple question. Do you think that the situation really is better now than it was under Trump?
I require some aid. My cosmic might returns.
Anyone willing to help? The mission area is yours to capture now.
Like, obviously, you've got the Israel-Palestinian war that's going on right now, which is kind of bad, but, like, broadly speaking,
eyes
I'm not
over
sure
here.
how
We
much that
have done
affects the
it.
Middle East, as like the collapse of Syria. 2013 Syrian civil war
Healing
sent
power.
millions of immigrants throughout
We got a
all
sniper.
Europe, and
Which was under
which was under Obama and continued under. In turn, like,
did Syria end up with Russia?
By the eye of Agamotto!
I know that there's access to courts down there. I don't know.
I mean, the reason is because Barack Obama suggested that there was a red line that would be drawn in the face of chemical weapons use. Bashar Assad then used chemical weapons in Syria, and Barack Obama was unwilling to then
Destiny
essentially create
awaits.
consequences for Syria in the form of any sort of Western strike, and so instead he outsourced it to Russia. This is 2013, 2014.
Sure.
Right,
Do you
so
think there might have been some hesitancy after, like, seeing how Libya ended up?
I need healing.
Like,
Victory! Healing power.
It says,
I mean, there might have been like a mistake
the
learned.
point that I'm making is
like,
that actually the Middle East is historically speaking, historically good under Donald Trump. I mean, it's very difficult.
Cosmo's heels here.
Or after.
Was it, I mean, the Syrian, I don't think that Trump contributed to the Syrian improving much.
Plenty of ISIS.
I mean, ISIS have been getting wrecked by
We are undefeatable!
Assad's army, by Putin, by Turkey, literally everybody was
You get when president. I mean, things got better with ISIS.
On your tail!
I mean, yeah, they did. I mean,
Things got worse with ISIS.
Your team's tactic progress is past
And
the
then they
halfway point.
not the JV squad.
yeah, but I
And
don't
then
know if
they-
ISIS is originating in Syria and Baghdadi and all of the growth of that is necessarily Obama's fault. I know that we like to say that pick up a little bit of I don't think that when you like questions that presidents the biggest criticism I have for like Middle Eastern policy, I think the Doha Accords.
Shields up!
I think that's like one of the biggest blemishes of right now. I would also argue that the embassies to Jerusalem is also contributed to
This is real firepower!
argue precisely the opposite, especially given the fact that after my
Cosmic might returns.
the Abraham Accords continued to sign and actually and that if
Oh no! Not Cap!
I have no doubt in my mind that we would now be a part of the Abraham Accords. In fact, it was
Born again!
and then when Joe Biden took office, Joe Biden the Abraham Accords out began wide variety. The biggest single effect in the Middle East
Keep fighting and keep our leader.
related to Kansas.
We're safe now.
Joe Biden's main approach to the Middle East is very similar to Joe Biden's approach, why the Middle East was chaotic under Obama and chaotic under Biden. And that was to alienate
Even small
allies like
victories are
Saudi
worth
Arabia
celebrating.
and Israel,
Cosmos heals
and
you.
instead to try to make common cause for some deals with Iran. But they did incentivize terrorism from Iran. We're watching the Iran attempting to use everyone feels better already.
Capture the Cosmos area. Keep going.
What Biden actually was
You give it! Ship-shaping
dealing with Saudi Arabia, trying to bring them into the Abraham. Right? That was what was going on. And Iran saw that, and Iran decided that they were going to throw grenades into the middle of those negotiations. I essentially activated Hamas, activates Hamas. Israel, as a sovereign nation state, has to respond to the murder of hundreds of its citizens and the taking and kidnapping of 140. Israel has to do that not only to go after
You'll have to keep fighting until
for
we
them,
have
but
a
also
winner.
to reestablish military deterrence in
I'm
the violent
opening a
region of
portal.
the world. Hezbollah gets active on Israel's northern border. Hezbollah is an Iranian proxy. They get active on the northern border.
A shortcut through space!
Houthis in Yemen get active. These are all the reasons why this is happening.
By the eye of Agamemnon!
But not only that, they're threatening global warming. You're talking about the effects of global warming. I totally agree.
This is real firepower!
Is nearly double what it was just a few weeks ago, and that is because a ragtag group of Houthi barbarians are attacking international shipping and forcing everybody to stop using the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, instead going around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa. All of that is the result of the fact that Joe
When
Biden
sight
reoriented
open
the
your
United States
eyes,
in the very
reality-
early days in favor of a more
I will bring
pro-Iranian
peace
stance
to this
with Robert
union.
Malley to negotiate
I'm
the
a
Iran
good
deal.
guy
It turns
who
out
occasionally
using
takes
proxies,
stuff that
yeah,
doesn't
many of
belong
his aides
to
were actually taking money from Iran. The Biden administration, literally one of their first
30
acts
seconds
was to
before you
delist
attack.
the Houthis as
Get
a terror
ready.
organization and sanctions against the Houthis. These are all moves
Hey,
that
I'm
Biden
looking
made
for
very
a
early on.
giant
They were
tree
disastrous.
and some
But
humanoid morons.
when it comes to
You
domestic
seen 'em?
policy, I think he hasn't been
They're
nearly as damn
kinda
good
my
domestic
only
policy
friends.
as he has on foreign policy.
Sure. So just on a couple of Middle Eastern things. So one of the big things that threw the Middle East into disaster was we are all traumatized by it now. The Iraq invasion from a Republican president. Sure, you're there, right? Sure.
The battle starts in
deposition of
5,
Saddam Hussein and
4,
everything that followed
3,
after probably
2,
contributed more to the growth of ISIS and the destabilization of
All
that
you need
entire
to do
region.
is
Probably
capture
wouldn't
the mission
I think
area.
that
Got
under,
it?
prior to Bush,
That
for
time has
Clinton, even at the
come.
beginning of Bush's presidency, we were on some kind of road to normalcy with Iran, which I think has to happen, whether we like them or not, until Bush, for whatever reason, decides to throw Iran into the axis of evil.
I need some evidence that we're on a road to normalcy with Iran.
We do in the wait. What?
That we're on a road to normalcy with Iran in the 1990s.
My understanding is that from the late 90s prior to
That's the first
generate Iran, that there was going to be some path forward.
Looks like the mission area is yours to capture now.
I find it very difficult to believe in accepting this Iran. I mean, we just disagree.
A little help,
Okay, yeah,
please.
sure, we can disagree on that, but I know that the after effects, the after effects of Iraq was most of the
I agree. Yeah,
We are being targeted.
Iraq not having a government there that was functional for
and was effectively the government, right? Originally,
Cosmo!
the government disbanding the
all the former
Party, sectarian, yes.
Yeah, all horrible. All the president. But
Don't disagree.
that that probably contributed more to ISIS, to the growth of power in Iran, maybe even to the
Where there is
destabilization of
evil
Syria,
in this
probably more than
universe,
anything that Obama
I will
did.
be there to balance
also,
it.
when we look at Iran funding people in the region, I don't disagree with that as well. I
Need
think
to
Iran is the
strengthen
number
my
one
field.
instigator of bad guy things right now. Iran, the IRGC,
I have
support
found more
I think that Iran is a nation. However, I don't know if the path forward is constantly being belligerent to Iran or trying to figure out some road to Iran. I don't know if it's collapse of Iran or the destruction of that country, considering how unpopular the Ayatollah even is there. I don't think our big supporters of the I feel like moving on a path where nuclear inspection, nuclear deal, nuclear inspection, you're not unloading nuclear weapons, some direction to get on a good terms with you. I feel like that's the most important thing.
We better retreat.
As much as people like to look at
All
Iran,
Father himself could not have handled the power.
Iran, I think
UAE and
and
Morocco.
the UAE and Morocco, yeah, are kind of like all of these people, even Saudi Arabia, already have like de facto normalization with Israel.
I mean, to pretend that anybody 50 years ago is talking normalization with Saudi Arabia.
This shield will
They've
serve
already
me
been,
well.
they're already de facto trading. They've already been
Wild claim that Israel and Saudi Arabia were going to normalize 15 years ago.
We are undefeatable!
This is real firepower!
By the eye of Agamotto!
look at Israel and they go, okay, we got Palestinians who,
Control lost!
do nothing. And then you got Israel, which is on a region with no natural resources to somehow become like an economic giant. They're going to trade with. Their population is educated. They, have military power. All of the
team's
leadership
capture
in these Middle
progress
Eastern
has
countries
passed
are
the
wanting to
halfway
be friendly
point.
with Israel and are
There's
engaging
still
in
so
trade
much
de
to
facto
do.
with Israel. And the idea that like the UAE and Bahrain were brought in, they're like, oh well, now we're going to officially say this. I just
Those are the first steps
Thanks
toward
so much.
obviously
I am
formation
at your
of a new Middle
service.
East in which
Another
economics
fearsome
dominate over the chief obstacle to that is Iran. The notion that negotiations with the Ayatollah were going to be a solution to any of this is
But do we think
absolutely
is
benign.
it the Abraham
better already.
Saudi Arabia to take a stance against Iran?
No,
They're already fighting. They're already fighting.
Roswell?
Look at the Arab
Find that sniper.
no. The point
There
that
has to happen. Something has to happen. There has to be something no matter what.
You're mine!
no, it has to happen is
There's
containment,
still so much
which
to
was what
do.
was which was what was taking place with the increased normalization.
All those
with the
crises I
Sunni Arab
quietly
world.
put out?
And Israel combined with significant economic sanctions.
Good to go! You'll have to keep fighting until we have a winner! Anyone willing to help?
Some sort of peaceful acquiescence to resistance. They're literally funding.
Hasn't that been that you had a region with violence for a long time, and then finally Turkey was like,
We are undefeatable!
made them a lot of money, had conversations with Israel, the economy, the economic gain.
But the situation with Turkey is actually worse than Turkey than I do.
By the eye of Agamotto!
This is real firepower!
If I said Jordan, Egypt,
Yeah, okay, so right, so
yeah, so like, in terms of like Egypt and Jordan, right, were the first two.
you need here's the thing. You need. Is it possible that you could theoretically come to a deal with Iran only with a new leadership? It is
You'll
true
have to
for
keep
every peace
fighting until
agreement
we
in the
have a
region.
winner!
You could not. Israel could not have made peace with.
Well, they made peace with Egypt, and Sadat was the leader for Yom Kippur.
Not make peace with Nasser. Right. The point is that this is a different regime. You need
We've
a
got
different
trouble.
regime. This
But I'm
one-
saying the same regime that did in order for Yom Kippur War, the
Feeling
same
good.
regime that
By
negotiated.
the eye of Agamotto!
It is also true that is a relationship that could be cultivated specifically because it was Gaddafi declared he would come to the table. Have the Iranians made clear that they would come to the table over, for example, the existence of the state of Israel?
Armed and dangerous!
But I think people probably
Literally,
felt the
their
same.
Every single one of their proxies, every one of them, not only calls for the destruction of the state of Israel, they also call for the destruction of America. I mean, this is literally the Houthi slogan. They're busy hitting ships.